Chapter 21. Notes on a Rerun. This is not a happy jury. 6 men, 6 women, 7 black, 5 white. When Judge Oliver told them to go home and come back in the morning with enough clothes for a 2-week stay, 4 of the women burst into tears. One of the men jumped up and shouted, "I refuse it! I refuse it! I'll lose work! It'll make me hostile to the case!" Another man bolted for the door and had to be restrained by bailiffs. "You can take me to jail," he screamed. "I'm not serving." The judge summoned the 6 recalcitrant jurors to his chambers and listened to their complaints. Then he told them to go home and pack. Spencer Lawton leads off with police photographer Sergeant Donna Stevens, who gives a photographic tour of the Mercer house, using huge blow-ups on an easel. "This is an outside shot of the house," she said. "This is the living room. This is the hallway. That's the grandfather clock dumped over. This is the doorway to the study, showing the victim lying on the floor. This is a shot of the blood on the carpet." When she is finished, Seiler steps up for cross-examination. "Do you remember photographing a pouch and a chair leg?" he asks. "Yes." "Did you photograph it when you first got there?" "Yes, sir, I did." "And did you photograph it again after the detectives and the other people had been stirring around in there?" "Yes." Seiler holds up the 2 photographs, showing the pouch and the chair leg in different positions. "I'm interested in the travelling pouch," he says, raising an eyebrow. Sergeant Stevens concedes that the chair had been moved, but she denies that the pouch had been moved. Seiler asks if by looking at the designs on the carpet she can see that indeed the pouch too has been moved. No, she does not see any such thing. Seiler keeps at it. "Well, let's look at the first picture and count the dots in the carpet," he said. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. "And the second picture, there are only 2 dots, right?" Sergeant Stevens grudgingly admits that the pouch has also been moved. The jury is entertained by Seiler's self-assured courtroom manner. He strides back and forth, impeccably groomed in custom-tailored suits, French cuffs, highly polished shoes. He thunders and growls. His tone shifts from curiosity to sarcasm to outrage to surprise. Lawton is dull by comparison. He stands flat-footed in a rumpled suit. His manner is shy and unassuming. He flinches whenever Seiler shouts objection. "Mr. Lawton is leading the witness again." Seiler says this repeatedly to unnerve Lawton and send a message to the jury that the DA lacks a grasp of basic courtroom procedure. At Clary's drugstore, Ruth wonders out loud whether the trial will be as juicy as the first. Luther Driggers says he thinks Williams made a mistake after shooting Hansford. "He should have taken Danny's body out west, pulled his teeth, dissolved him in nitric acid, peeled off his skin and fed it to the crabs." "Why such a complicated cover-up?" Ruth asks. Luther shrugs. "Beats leaving the body on the floor of Mercer House." "Well, whatever Jim Williams should have done with the body, he's going about his defense in the wrong way," says Quentin Lovejoy, putting his coffee cup down gently. Mr. Lovejoy is a soft-spoken classics scholar in his mid-60s. He lives with his maiden aunt in a high Victorian townhouse. "All this talk about Danny Hansford being a brutal, violent criminal. Jim Williams does himself no credit blaspheming the boy the poor way." "But Quentin," Ruth protests, "Danny Hansford beat up his sister. His mother took out a police warrant against him. He's been arrested umpteen times. He's been in jail. He was a common criminal." "Not at all," says Mr. Lovejoy, in a voice slightly louder than a whisper. The only crime that boy ever committed was turning 20. Seiler objects to the repeated use of the term crime scene by prosecution witnesses. It has not yet been established that any crime has been committed here, he says. Judge Oliver apparently does not hear Seiler. In fact, the judge appears to be dozing. His eyes are closed, his chin is resting on his chest. The judge has made it abundantly clear, by heaving deep sighs and becoming increasingly cranky, that he is bored with this retrial. His apparent catnaps are causing comment in the courthouse. At any rate, he does not respond to Seiler's protests. Less than a minute later, the prosecution witness says crime scene again, and Seiler lets it pass. In the corridor, during a recess, a pair of purple glasses catches my eye. Minerva is sitting on a bench with a plastic shopping bag on her lap. I sit down next to her, and she tells me she has been asked to appear as a character witness for Williams. The defense hopes she will appeal to the 7 blacks on the jury. She will identify herself as a laundress, which is her part-time profession, but from the witness stand she'll be in a position to make direct eye contact with the DA, the judge, and the members of the jury. This will enable her to put a curse on each one of them. While she waits, she sits out in the hall, humming and gurgling softly to herself. Occasionally she cracks open the door and peers into the courtroom. Danny Hansford's mother, Emily Bannister, also sits in the corridor. Sonny Seiler has listed her as a defense witness, just as Bobby Lee Cook did, in order to keep her out of the courtroom. She is quiet and composed, and it strikes me that Seiler's main concern is not that she will cause a disturbance in front of the jury, but that her waif-like appearance will win their hearts. In any case, she still refuses to talk to the press or to me. As the trial progresses, Mrs. Bannister sits out in the corridor just outside the courtroom, reading, writing notes in a journal, and needle-pointing. The first Sunday in court, both Seiler and Judge Oliver appear to be on edge. They are worried about the Georgia-Mississippi game, which is currently taking place in Athens. Seiler stations an associate in the corridor listening to the play-by-play on a portable radio. Oliver, a past president of the University of Georgia Club, asks Seiler to keep him advised of the situation. Seiler does so during whispered conferences at the bench. Georgia wins 20-7. Monday morning, Williams testifies. Standing outside the courtroom beforehand, he appears relaxed. Sonny called me last night to tell me to act humble and remorseful, he says. I don't know if I can manage that, but I am making a sincere effort to look impoverished. I'm wearing the same blue blazer I wore on Friday. It'll give the jury the impression that I haven't got anything else to wear. What they won't know is that it's a custom-made Dunhill jacket, that the buttons are 18-karat Georgia gold. Seiler puts his new game plan into effect. Before Williams takes the stand, his sister escorts his mother out of the courtroom. On direct examination, Seiler asks Williams to explain his relationship with Danny Hansford. He was a nice fellow, Williams said. He could be charming. He had a girlfriend, I had mine. But to me, sex is just a natural thing. We'd had sex a few times. Didn't bother me, didn't bother him. I had my girlfriend and he had his. It was just an occasional, natural thing that happened. The expressions on the jurors' faces suggest they do not find this arrangement natural at all. Lawton steps up to cross-examine Williams. Williams regards him with an undisguised contempt. You indicated that you and Hansford had sex from time to time, says Lawton. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And you feel that sex is a perfectly natural thing? Well, you see, it's not only just natural. At the time, Danny was a hustler on Bull Street, selling himself to anybody who wanted to pay for it. Exactly. says Lawton. Right, so he was a street kid, and he'd been... Exactly, says Lawton. Right, so he was a street kid and had been since 14 years of age, I think you indicated. Oh, yes. An 8th grade dropout, and something on the order of 20 years old, is that right? He was 21, no child. I wouldn't, of course, dispute your right to have any relationship you wanted to, but you were 52 and he was 21. Was that a natural and normal relationship? Mm-hmm. I was 52 years old, but he had 52 years worth of mileage on him. I don't have anything else, said Lawton. Thank you very much. William's choice of words may not have been what Seiler had hoped for, but his frankness had made it unnecessary for Lawton to call Hansford's 2 friends in rebuttal. That, Seiler believes, had spared Williams major damage. During a recess, Seiler tells me Judge Oliver is old and tired. He's also terrified of being reversed by State Supreme Court again, so he is allowing the defense to bring in a lot more evidence about Danny Hansford's history of violence than he did in the first trial. We wouldn't get half that stuff past a younger, more able judge, says Seiler. Barry Thomas, the foreman of Williams' shop, is one of the people permitted by Judge Oliver to tell a story about Hansford's violence. A slightly built Scotsman, Thomas reveals how, without warning and for no apparent reason, Hansford physically attacked him at Mercer House 2 months before he died. That was the end of the workday, Thomas says, and I was getting ready to leave through the front door of Mercer House when I heard these footsteps behind me. I looked around and I saw Mr. Hansford charging towards me. He just went at me and kicked me in the stomach. Jim grabbed him and pulled him off me and said, "You better get out of here. Danny's gone crazy." Well, a couple of days later, Mr. Hansford apologised for kicking me. He says he don't know why he did it. He wanted to kick me in the stomach. No. He wanted me to kick him in the stomach in return, but I said no. I thought he was sick. I have no idea why he attacked me, other than that was just his nature. Thomas steps down after testifying. As he goes out into the hall, a hand reaches up and grabs his ear. He lets out a sharp "Aye!" as the door closes behind him. I slip into the corridor and see that the hand clutching his ear is Minerva's. "Why did you say that?" she hisses. "Say what?" said Thomas, grabbing hold of her arm. "About the dead boy," she says, giving his ear a sharp yank. "Why did you say that?" "'Cause it's true," says Thomas. "He kicked me in the stomach for no good reason." "That don't matter," she says, letting go of his ear. "You got that boy angry again. Now we gotta calm him down again." "What do you want me to do?" "Get me some parchment. I needs a pen, too. One that's got red ink in it. And let me think. Scissors. Gotta have a scissors. And a candle and a Bible. I need 'em quick." "Parchment?" Thomas asks. "Where am I going to find—" Minerva grabs him by the ear again. "I know where you can get a Bible." "I know where you can get a Bible," I say, stepping forward, "at the motel across the street." $5 coaxes a Bible and a candle out of the desk clerk at the motel. At Friedman's art supply shop, Thomas buys a red felt-tip pen and a package of heavy vellum tracing paper, which is the closest thing they have to parchment. When he starts to pay, Minerva puts her hand on his arm and stops him. "Lay the money down on the table first," she says. "That's the way the lady... That way the lady can't work with your hand. Kiss it before you lay it down. so it will come back to you. Thomas obediently kisses the money and lays it on the counter. Back in Thomas's car, Minerva spreads out her paraphernalia on the back seat and says, "Take as close as we can get to water." Thomas drives down the steep cobblestone street leading from Factor's Walk to River Street. We move slowly along River Street Esplanade, the docks on one side, the old warehouses on the other. Minerva points to an old three-masted schooner. "Right there." Thomas pulls to a stop at the ship's bow, and Minerva lights the candle and begins to chant. With the red pen, she scribbles phrases from the Bible onto the vellum. When she's done, she cuts the vellum into small squares and sets them on fire one by one. Glowing ashes float around like black snowflakes in the car. "Take these 3 pieces I ain't burned," she says to Thomas, "and tell Mr. Jim to put them in his shoes." Suddenly, I became aware that there are 4 of us present, not 3. The 4th is a policeman who is looking through the window about a foot from my face. "Ma'am," he says. Minerva holds the burning candle in front of her face and stares at the policeman through her purple glasses. She opens her mouth wide. "Ah," she says. Then she puts the candle in her mouth and closes her lips around it. As she does, the light sets her cheeks aglow like a jack-o'-lantern. The glow goes out with a sizzle. She hands the extinguished candle to the policeman. "We ain't burning no more," she says softly. She taps Thomas on the shoulder as we pull away. I can see the policeman in the side view mirror. He's still holding the candle and looking blankly in our direction when we turn the corner. Back in the courtroom, a psychiatrist testifies that as a child, Danny Hansford was a breath holder. What he means by that, he says, is that Danny used to torment his mother by holding his breath until he turned blue and passed out. Minerva will not testify after all. She has suddenly realized that she knows one of the jurors, and he knows her. "I done some black magic on him," she says. "He's still mad as hell." She will not say what she did to him, or why. Dr. Irving Stone, the forensic pathologist from Dallas, takes the stand and makes forceful arguments for the defense about the gunshot residue and other aspects of the shooting, as Seiler had said he would. His comments are supported by Joseph Burton, the medical examiner from Atlanta who testified in the first trial and had returned for this one. More compelling than their testimony, however, is the casual shop talk they engage in while waiting in the corridor to take the stand. "I identified 357 bodies in that Delta crash we had in Dallas the other day," says Stone. "Got 30 a day. It took 12 days. "Geez," says Burton. "Nice going. How many did you get from the fingerprints?" 74%. How about dental records? Can't remember. 10% maybe? My favorite was the one I got from a pacemaker. Noted the serial number. Called the manufacturer. Got the name that way." Seiler has saved his 2 surprise witnesses for late in the trial. Vanessa Blanton, a brunette in her mid-20s, is a waitress at the 1790 Cafe and Restaurant. She says she used to live in the townhouse on Monterey Square, and she remembers seeing a young man fire a pistol into the trees about a month before Danny Hansford was killed. She did not know that this incident had any bearing on Williams's trial until recently, when a law associate of Sonny Seiler's happened to overhear her mentioning the incident to another waitress at the restaurant. Seiler subpoenaed her. She takes the witness stand. "We closed the bar at 2:30, then I got in my car and went straight home. I was going up the stairs when I heard a gunshot. I looked over my shoulder towards Mr. Williams's house. Sounded as if it come from that direction. There was a young man in blue jeans and a t-shirt, holding a gun. pointing it towards the trees. He fired another shot. What did you do after that? Seiler asks. I opened my front door to go into my apartment, and when I looked back, I noticed the young man was going back up the front steps to Mr. Williams's house. Then I collected my thoughts for a minute, and I thought about calling the police, but when I looked out the window again, a police car was already pulling up outside the house. Spencer Lawton sees Miss Blanton as a serious blow to his April 3rd scenario. He challenges her ability to see the figure in front of Mercer House clearly at that distance and in the dark of night, but she sticks to her story. Seiler's second surprise witness is Dinah Smith, a blonde woman in her mid-30s. On the night Danny Hansford was shot, she was visiting Savannah from Atlanta and staying with her cousin just off Monterey Square. Sometime after 2 o'clock, she went out to sit on a bench in Monterey Square and enjoy the night air. After I'd been in the square for some minutes, there were several loud gunshots all fired at once. It was very loud. It seemed to be coming from all around. I just kind of sat there frozen. I looked around and remained in the square for 20 to 30 minutes and then walked across to the apartment. Were there any police cars in front of Mr. Williams's house at the time? Seiler asks. No, sir. The door was standing open. The lights were on. All right, says Seiler. Did you see anyone? No, sir. Did you call the police then? No, I didn't. Why not? I wouldn't have known what to tell them. I didn't know what I heard. The next morning, Mrs. Smith left her cousin's house to go to the beach and saw a TV news van in front of Mercer House. She read about the shooting later, and only then realised what had happened. Mrs. Smith says she was introduced to Williams by her cousin on a subsequent visit to Savannah, while Williams was appealing his conviction. She told Williams what she had heard, and he asked her to speak to his lawyers. The import of what Dinah Smith has to say is all that all of the shots, as she heard them, were fired in rapid succession, just as Williams had said. There were no pauses, no time, if she is to be believed, for Williams to get a second gun and fake the shots from Hansford's side of the desk. The final day in court, a Saturday. On tap for today, closing arguments, the judge's instructions to the jury, and the Georgia-Mississippi gang. In his summation, Sonny Seiler puts heavy emphasis on the clumsiness of the police at Mercer House, comparing them to the Keystone Cops. They had so many people in Jim Williams' study when they were investigating the scene, and they couldn't They had so many people in Jim Williams' study when they were investigating the scene that they couldn't count them all, he says. First, Corporal Anderson comes, and he brings a rookie cop along. Following them, Officer Traub, as I recall. Then they started coming out the woodwork. In they come, one after the other. I don't know how many, something like 14 in all. And it wasn't a matter of just coming. It was come join the party. Because you don't have many things like this happening in Savannah. In a historical mansion with an environment of antiques and fine things and an air of mystery and intrigue. Then they all go into the study at one time or another. Anderson, White, Chesler, Burns, Traub, Gibbons, Donna Stevens, all of them, back and forth, in and out, all around the room. Everybody's curious, you see. They're picking stuff up and they're putting it down. Every expert on the stand, including their own, says it is not good investigative procedure. Yet they want you to believe they had some sacred veil over all the stuff when they took photographs. They tell you they secured the scene. Baloney. You've seen the pictures. Lawton, in his closing statement, will not give up on the idea that Jim Williams staged the April 3rd incident in spite of what Vanessa Blanton says she saw. Lawton tells the jury, if you believe Vanessa Blanton really saw Danny Hansford out there shooting in Monterey Square, then okay. but I will suggest to you that it may be very difficult to tell, down there in those shadows, whether you're looking at Danny Hansford or Jim Williams. We have to entertain the possibility that it was a dry run that sets up Danny Hansford's violent nature within a month or so of when he is killed. Of Dinah Smith and the shots she heard on a park bench a month later, Lawton makes it clear he does not believe her. I will suggest to you that she is a friend trying her best to help out in a pinch. Towards the end of his summation, Lawton engages in a bit of stage business concerning the 20-pound trigger pull on Danny's gun. The defense tells us that when Danny Hansford fired at Williams and missed, it was because the trigger pull on his gun was so strong. So strong indeed that Dr. Stone, an ex-FBI agent and obviously no weakling, had to use 2 hands to fire it. I'd like to show you something if I may. Lawton hands Danny's gun to his petite female assistant and asks her to point it at the wall and pull the trigger. She does so with no effort at all and without jiggling the barrel a millimeter. Seiler objects to the demonstration, but Oliver overrules him. After the closing arguments, Judge Oliver reads the jury its instructions. He offers 3 choices: guilty of murder, guilty of voluntary manslaughter, or not guilty. It's 5:30 p.m. when the jury retires to consider its verdict. Williams and his family head back to Mercer House. Seiler goes to his office in Armstrong House. On the way out, he gets good news from his man in the corridor. Georgia has beaten Ole Miss, 36-11. I ask Minerva if she wants to go and get something to eat while we wait. She shakes her head and rummages in her shopping bag. I got work to do here. 3 hours later, the jury sends word that it has reached a decision. Seiler returns to the courtroom, clearly worried. It's too soon, he says. The case has too many issues. We can't have a well thought out verdict just yet. Maybe they wanted to get it over with and go home. Blanche Williams, too, has a sense of foreboding. We hadn't sat down to dinner when they called us, she said. I made a caramel cake. That's James's favourite, and I was just getting it ready. Before we left the house, I saw James slip something into his sock. Maybe it was cigarettes. Makes me think James must feel he's not coming back home. I sit down next to Minerva and notice almost at once that there is a thin trail of white powder on the front of the floor. I sit down next to Minerva and notice almost at once that there is a thin trail of white powder on the floor in front of the jury box. There are also twigs and pieces of root in front of the judge's bench. Minerva is chewing slowly. The jury files into the jury box, and she glares at them through her purple glasses. Upon the judge's order, Williams rises. The foreman hands a piece of paper to the clerk, who reads the verdict aloud. We find the defendant guilty of murder. Judge Oliver bangs his gavel. The sentence is life imprisonment. That's mandatory. The courtroom is silent. Williams calmly takes a sip of water from a paper cup, then walks across the floor and is escorted by bailiffs through the door that leads to the tunnel that will take him to jail. I feel Minerva's hand on my arm. She is gazing straight ahead at a group of people milling around Spencer Lawton, and she's smiling. What is it? I ask, wondering what she could be smiling about. She points a forefinger at the district attorney, whose back is turned to us. He's gathering up papers and accepting the murmured congratulations of his staff, unaware of the footprint-sized smudge of chalky white powder on the tail of his suit jacket and the seat of his trousers. Did you put that white stuff on the DA's chair, Minerva? I ask. You know I did. What is it? High John the Conqueror. A powerful root. But what good can it do now? By getting where it got, that power means Delia still be working on the DA, she says. Delia was one of the names Minerva had called out in the graveyard. And she got him by the seat of his pants, too. She ain't done settling with him. What do you think will happen? I ask. You mean if Delia don't leave go? Yeah, if she hangs in there. Why, the DA is going to have to turn Mr. Jim loose. It's just that simple. If I was the DA, I wouldn't be thinking about no celebration. Not with Delia hanging on her ass like she be. When she was living, she was bad. Dead, she's worse. And now, she about to raise all kinds of hell. What happened to the other 8 dead women you called in the graveyard? Didn't get no reply from the first 3. Delia was the 4th. And Dr. Buzzard, is he involved? He gave Delia the okay. Has he given you a number yet? Minerva laughs. Shit, no. He likes me po. That way I got to keep working and going to the flower garden to see him. That way he keeps a hold on me. Minerva picks up her shopping bag and gets ready to leave. The bag opens momentarily, and I catch a glimpse of what looks like a chicken foot. Minerva waves goodbye and slips into the crowded corridor. I make my way out of the courthouse, past Sonny Seiler, who is standing in front of television lights, talking about an appeal. The courthouse flack sidles up, looking slyly amused as usual. With good behaviour, he says, Williams will be out in 7 years. I'm told he might be out even sooner, I reply, if a certain lady named Delia has anything to say about it. Who? The flack cups his ear. Delia. Who is Delia? You mean who was Delia? I said. It's all I know about her. She's dead.